Okay. Hi. Let's start a community meeting, and I'm going to share just for the sake of synchronization my screen with the doc that I'm dating. So I guess most of you are not following the doc. It's okay. It's just for documentation, I guess. So if you want to though, and you add anything, you can do that. So that's that, and this will sort of help us sort of remind us where we were and where we're going. So we covered, I guess, some of the code last time, and we were looking at these conditions, and I think we posted some more comments during the time after the meeting as well. And Paul did some fixes, and there was one, I guess, question you asked yesterday about the error handling with the streams, which I couldn't yet, so I couldn't get into the details of looking at that specific code that you sent me, because I wanted to push the comments that I had pending first.
Okay.
So I thought it would be good that we sync on your question here. Okay, so let's just take that. So the next one is here, and let me sort of go through some of the open things that I saw. Let me change sharing here. Yeah. So basically, I think I covered all the code. I don't think maybe some portions I didn't really manage to go over, but most of it I really read most of it and gave comments on wherever I had. And I think the remaining comments for me is basically just naming things back to changing the names back to things that make more sense right now rather than what we thought originally, right? So there's a bunch of things like that. And there is some cleanups, right? So we talked about complete upload object upload range, or whatever that case, and we eventually left very little there. So I think, unless I'm not noticing where we are still using it, but I think we don't need it anymore, so we can make some of that cleanup. So I noted that.
Yeah, one thing, one of the reasons I think we should keep that API is it just for, first of all, it's for parity purpose. It's probably it's not that big deal, but just like early on you have you mentioned like all the other normal upload.
Yep.
Basically they have create, they have complete, just for parity purpose. Make it similar to other one, and then secondly, it probably it makes for API compatible, backward compatible purpose, and maybe to have it now rather than later on. And third one is for debugging purpose, actually that one returns a number of parts and upload size. So even though they are not stored in the database, but just for for the purpose of debugging, so it just print out what is to be, so that we don't have to go through a database to get those information. So that's that's the three reasons I think we probably just should keep it. That's my opinion.
Yeah, it's good points. So let me try and so I think I considered them, and let me tell you what I think. So regarding the first is about parity with the others, and I think I also mentioned that when we talked about it last time. I mean, previously, and I also thought it was a good idea. But then, I mean, when we consider that in this case, what we chose was a model where we don't create any additional objects, right? Or additional, I mean, metadata, essentially, then it sounds a little bit weird that we are referring to it in the same manner that we are creating an object versus creating a multipart, which both are represented in the metadata as actual, documents that we actually store and index and use. And in this case, there is no entity to represent it. It's mostly, it's as if it's just, an override operation. But it's not that we want to support override in general. We are supporting it for the sake of, immutable sort of objects that we know that how exactly they are, what data they should have, right? Basically. So I think it makes, like, there is some considerations here and there, but I think the last one that you mentioned, the debuggability, like having some debug information while we do it, that's a good point, but I would not do that in the IO path. So if we really want to do that, let's do that. But let's take it to some background process or some CLI operation or some whatever thing that will help us, right, when we are working, but not in line in the same. That is the cache read. Well, it's a miss operation, right? So it's not necessarily that bad, but it is expected to happen a lot. It's not that this is very rare or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
So I think from that aspect, I would prefer not to do redundant debug operations. I would do these debug operations in other processes, of course. In other flows.
Okay. Would that
so? Yeah, go ahead.
Would that make sense to, just to have an API to calculate the number of parts and then the upload size? Just like a guide. Maybe we'll have an information called guide something guide.
First of all, it would make sense, I think, first of all, as some kind of a tool, even if it's a developer tool, just even not as an API, even something that goes and just reads whatever we need, right?
Okay.
And of course that it's easier usually with an API because then everything else is already set up for you. But I mean, let's think about it for a second. Where does it make most sense for us? So if I imagine an object API saying something like, get or calculate, something about the cache information, right? Something like that, right? We can do things in an API like that and return the information and have a very convenient to use information on the cache. But I think these cases typically we end up doing them in some form of utility. Let's look at that. Like we did a lot of things in what was that in S3? S3 cat is one of the utilities, but it's not really related to this to this flow of accessing metadata very easily. So something else probably will make more sense.
Yeah, maybe let's that's fine. We can remove this API. Then think about if so far it's just we have a different way. I guess we can always get the number of parts, the size, upload size offline.
Right. I mean, from the developer side, I still want it to be easy enough so that we don't have to repeat a lot of database commands just to do very simple things. But
yeah, I agree. It probably is not a big deal. Not, I actually create such utility in a test, functional test. Just try to, the purpose of that, having the, utility or API call or utility function is just to just try to verifying the test. I actually have that. Never mind. Put into
okay.
yeah.
So you can certainly add tools, right? To the tools, there's like SRC tools. You can add any command line tool there, and you can use tools that even connect to the database. So you can utilize most of the things inside, but more of a sort of on-demand invocation. Okay. Okay. So that's that. I think. I mean, you can still make changes to these suggestions. I mean, it's not that we can't have these functions, but I mean, I don't really want them to do much. So if you insist, like, we can have them like the create and complete, but make them very make sure we don't do redundant operations that will slow us down.
Yeah, we can name it like Python guide. If that naming is changed to guide, then we don't have to complete. That's if you have create, probably makes sense to have complete. It's just from
yes, I agree. Yeah, I agree. This is why I suggested both changes together in this, because I thought, okay, so we can get rid of this. Now it doesn't really make sense to call something that doesn't create anything create. Let's just describe it more simply. So that's about that. The rest of it, let's go over it quickly. I think it's really just cleanups and things. So I don't think there's noticeable things. Oh, there's one or two things that I remember that I wanted to make sure you notice. So first of all is the ones in object server where we implement this is where we implement the complete upload flag, right? Where we create an object in a completed mode. So the only comment I had about this, and if we take a look at this code here, it's do that like this. Is that we want to make sure we don't ask the wrong question regarding what we do there. So what I thought was it makes more sense to take out these unrelated things to this specific flag, right? And make sure they are standalone features. So if we're saying that a namespace bucket, a caching bucket should set this flag, it should set this flag regardless of whether we are completing the object or not. Right?
Okay.
And if worm is a functionality that we have that it is dependent on the request, the actual request that we're sending out here, then we don't need to condition that to be only if we don't set that, right? I mean, I agree. I mean, it doesn't really make sense to mention, but then again, we probably want to set that where we have the knowledge of specifically which flow we're taking, and not make a decision right here that these two features do not coexist in any case. Okay, so that's about the object API here. I think it does make sense, right, not to set these, because if we are completing the object, we don't want to set them. Right? So that's clearly what we want to do. But and we might have other, if we have to have an e tag in a size, then of course we need to check these, right? So it makes sense.
So just want to make sure I understand. So for the worm one, you also would like to pull those out of that if, right? So that's what you suggest.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, and if we get to the point where we are saying there is so namespace cache should not allow passing on some information about worm, then let's assert this in that layer in the namespace cache there. Right?
Okay. Got it.
Okay, and I think the last one was last one was in range stream.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually not very. I mean, I think the implementation would work perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I was worried about was, first
Mm-hmm.
of all, that calling end as a
Mm-hmm.
stream implementer
Okay.
is not really what how it's meant, sort of, so to speak, to do. So end would be called by the somebody who's writing to our transform stream, right?
Okay.
So if I'm piping from somewhere to us,
Mm-hmm.
that stream will call end.
Okay.
And not to say that it would never work. I mean, it probably
Okay.
works because you tested it and
Okay.
you have that running. But what I'm
Yeah.
saying is that I'm not really sure that this is how they meant us to implement a transform stream.
Okay.
You can see the documentation a little bit. They suggest to call push null because then what you do is essentially close. You stop pushing on more items, basically,
Okay.
from this transform stream. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe we should call end eventually, but I'm not so sure.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that. And I think also, like, small things like this cannot really, I mean, data can't be really null or anything like that when you're getting it in a transform stream. It's always a string or a buffer or an object if you're using object mode, but we're not in this case. And not much more. Just my suggestion here is just to try to be more. How do you say that? To use more of a sort of a clear conditioning on what we're doing. But maybe I'm missing something. So I would like you to take a look and see if that makes sense.
Okay.
And I think that's it. I don't have any other comments at this point. So do you want to go to the your question?
I don't. Yeah.
Are you saying something, Paul? Like, maybe I can't hear you.
No. Yeah. I'm not saying anything. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm just drinking
Okay.
water.
Okay. So I think, do you think we have a question here regarding this handling that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, one of the
Something
things I
about
mentioned to you, just double check, we have one requirement regarding if, and if there's operation, if there's failure in hub operation, right, we fall back to, cache operation. If there's failure in cache operation,
right.
we fall back to hub, right? So that's one of the error handling scenarios. So the question I have for the specific piece of code is, we don't want to fall back during middle of streaming, right? Like, for example, we already stream, 100 bytes. We don't want to, fall back to like hub, because that is, first of all, that's difficult to do. Secondly, the stream already probably, concern about, whether the data is mismatched, right? For whatever the reason. Then that's the scenarios I would like to prevent from, fall back to hub during middle of the streaming. So I look at the code and also try to test that. It seems like, if there's a the error scenario, if there's exception happen during streaming, actually the stream will emit error event. So it's actually will be going to be handled in the eventually in the upper the HTTP handler level, rather than go back to hub, resume So that is good, but I just don't know whether there are other scenarios which is also or be trigger like other scenarios, which is we would have exception or error during streaming. Okay, which is go back to that catch scenario. If not, then we're safe. That's just my.
So okay, so let's take for this. So you are talking about not read from hub, but to read from cache, right? So we are looking at the case.
Yeah. So if we go down the specific, that try catch logic. So basically, I just try to say, if it has any issues with reading the object stream, if there's any exception, which can be recovered. For example, maybe there's some API calls just fail in the beginning, right? Database call, then we just we can fall back to read hub instead of fail the operation. So that's
Yeah. Right, and then so okay, but this is just the initiation of the stream, right? Then we return a stream. The stream can still
once they return, it'll be fine. Just like during let's say initialization part of stuff. If they have errors, that would like to catch, right? Then you say we can just fall back to hub. We don't want to fall back to hub during middle of the streaming. So that's just I want to make sure that but it doesn't seem like we do, because I test that, just intentionally inject failure during middle of the streaming. It's not fall into this catch logic. It's handled by the HTTP handler. But that's good.
That means essentially that we will close the stream because we don't have any functional way of recovering, so to speak. And the only recovery can be the client's responsibility.
So clients will experience, the stream got closed, unexpectedly, right? Unexpected. So so they will retry.
Right. So usually this is the right approach. I agree. I mean, we don't really need to push more retries, but at least in some cases, if the experience for the clients is not very good, then we might want to have some like a one level fallback and not indefinite, so that we don't retry more than that, but we just have one fallback saying cache doesn't work. We go to hub, for example, just that it smoothens the experience. But I'm not sure it's correct, and I would prefer to see how this behaves, and maybe even it's hard to say. I mean, how do we experience more hub errors or more cache errors, right? I suppose we will have both, but I'm sort of trying to understand which one is more critical at this point to have a fallback for. So might as well have a mode where if the hub isn't available, we allow reading from cache. It might be, it's not consistent in any case, but it might be still a way that we would like to have, like extend maybe the DTTL in some cases like that. Anyway, I don't think we know which one is best. So I agree with you. We can leave it at this point like that. So we wait to see. First of all, we wait to see if the stream actually initiated. If not, we can certainly throw it away and restart and start a stream against the hub. That's clear. That makes sense. Yep. So I'm. The other option would be here, like more down the stack, so that if we fail to read, if this stream gets closed at some point later on, I'm sorry, no, this is the read. I'm sorry, I was missing everything. Right, so right here, so this is why I was switching. Am I looking at the right place? This one is read. Yeah. Yes, this is the read stream. And if, okay, so if we are reading from cache here, we don't have any pipe. It's not that we have like multiple pipes or pass-throughs. We just have the cache read stream returned. And so, yeah, I see what you're saying. So we don't have any iteration being done from the layer of namespace cache. We just return the exact stream. Yeah. I was thinking about the case where we are doing the iteration and we can sort of handle things, but then you're right. So we handle that specifically for missing parts. So yeah. The generalization can be that not just missing. So missing part getter would be activated, would be called for every part or range in the cache that is not present in the cache. And
Right.
we can generalize saying not just missing, but also failures should do the same, right?
I believe that's the behavior how the get mapping behaves, right? Because right
Okay.
now you in the object IO, I believe if I remember correctly, the function actually pulls all mappings all together, then reads it. It's not like read one by one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not iterative. It just grab all, then do it. So then it's just up to I guess how read mapping works.
Yep. Right. So you're saying that's the differentiation here. If we have a null, and you're saying that we can, or we even do that, right? We set the null here to be.
Yeah, it's in the slice buffer function, which is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then that function actually.
Oh yeah, yes.
At the
Right
time,
here.
I already have all the mappings, so then I just really up to. I just if it's failure, I don't know what I mean. Maybe database have failure. What do they return?
Well, I think that this occurs after the failure already occurred, I suppose, right?
Okay.
Because we are slicing after we have data, right? So
Okay. Yeah.
failure already occurred there. We have some. So first of all, we have our own redundancies, but then if we exhaust them, then what am I doing? Sorry. If we exhaust them, then we still have a case where we fail, or if there's, like you said, there's failures even that may originate from metadata operations, from things like that, which are even before that, because it's when we are getting the mapping. Right? So it's somewhere around getting the mapping here, or like inside this one. So. And the slicing the buffers will be, where is that? The comment, probably right here. No, not yet. Okay, so I can find it, I guess, just to make sure we know what we're doing. Right here. Yeah, so it's right after we complete the read. Right, so if we had an error, we go before that. See. I don't know. I think it's good to do this a little bit iterative. I think it's okay. I'm not completely sure that every fallback makes sense. So I would keep it this simpler at this point and continue.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions? Somebody else? Okay. Okay, so I think, Paul, we can take it the next steps offline. Just resolve all the comments, make sure we cover it all, and then merge this and continue from there. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, I should be able to get it, resolved. Get those resolved in today. Then we'll see.
Yeah, sure. So I think I sort of covered most of the comments there. Even if we have some more, we probably need to start getting some more people available. I mean, getting this merged, getting some more people run this, and see how this behaves a little bit more. So I think it's a good step to merge. We have quite a lot of test coverage that you added. That's very good. So I'm feeling much more confident in this PR. So yeah, it looks very good.
Yeah, that's one thing I would like suggest to do. Since all the functional tests I created, I think we should let them run in the PR part of the process. That's probably
right.
One of the things I would like suggest to do because of the complexity of the caching feature. Just so if I write automatically during each PR, just ensure there's no issue.
It will be better, of course, to find where we break things, of course. But I think, Nimrod, do you want to comment on functional tests and automation? Yeah.
In what regard do you mean?
So we are not running these functional tests in the PR, in the CI.
No, this is a work in progress on our part to get the CI that we currently have expanded beyond Travis, which is very limited, and have other tests run as well. It's not there yet, but it is a work in progress.
Yeah, so I think we had some ups and downs with the, that of running our functional tests in the CI, and since it's an upstream sort of CI, but we don't have a lot of resources allocated there. It's an open source kind of CI there, and we didn't invest there because there's a lot of investment in downstream CIs. So I think we certainly want that to run in PR tests, and we don't have a solution yet. What we can do, at least for the sake of getting this organized, is maybe have some cadence of running it. I think maybe just once a week or anything like that would work, or I don't know.
If it's not automated, it's going to be it's going to be kept for a week or two, and then we need a process, right? And like I said, we are working on getting the automation run, but it would take some time. Having it run every week, we can start with doing it. I don't think it will be kept because you always have other tasks and you won't remember to run that specific test. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about later on. I don't want to occupy much.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, it's important. Okay. Okay, so what I suggest we do, so I'm going back to the meeting notes. And I think what I wanted to do is go over maybe the next things we have and see if we can make some progress there. Second. Okay, so Sanjeev, I know we didn't plan any, going over this. I just wanted to sort of, get your overview.
Okay.
And then we can take a look at this for next meeting. So make some comments before next meeting, and make sure we have some good review before that. So do you want to say a few words on the content?
Yeah. This PR is for evicting objects from the garbage tier, for the garbage tier. So I added a configuration LRU for the caching bucket, and then there is logic to evict parts from the garbage tier based on the same capacity as when we move from tier to tier. So if there is no additional tiers and the existing tier is approaching capacity, then the garbage it triggers the garbage trigger eviction logic and removes some parts from the from the caching store. And I also added some logic, so it uses Paul's range read PR. So once any part is evicted from an object, it's marked as a partial object. And so what happens is after the object becomes partial, and if there is a read performed on the object, since it's partial object, the partial object logic is triggered and it retrieves the missing ranges. There is also the server-side copy, but I've handled it in a separate PR. Essentially, I made some small changes for making sure server-side copy works. But I have more extended changes for server-side copy and multi-part upload in another PR.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the main changes here.
Okay, so
I still haven't done one. I haven't handled one case that if the entire if all the parts from the entire object are evicted, it is still being marked as partial. So I do need to add some. I think I'll add some logic in the DB cleaner worker that it will just periodically check all partial objects, and if there is, if all the parts are missing, it will just delete the metadata entry. I think that will be the best low performance work to handle for like the special case.
Yep.
I will probably add that logic today or tomorrow. And I haven't done any testing. I haven't created tests for it. So my one question I had was, I don't think I can create unit tests for this logic, right? I actually need to create some functional tests.
Yeah, I guess so, but maybe for some pieces it does make sense, and I'll show you one or two examples.
Okay.
Of how we managed to create things which are more processes that run even in background and etc., and still be able to mock enough of, because typically they consume very little from the system, so we can give them inject and mock information and tests for them rather easily, but it really depends. So, and I think that your case is should be simple, I think.
Yeah.
But I'll show you an example and we'll see. So, but before that, first of all, I just want to make sure that the terminology is clear. So garbage tier is a confusing term for something that I mentioned in the beginning of these discussions, that we already have a tiering model, and if we just mark one last tier, the last tier as a garbage tier, then this is essentially an eviction LRU, right? So it's not necessarily a real tier, and it's not as we implemented, right?
Yeah, it's not a tier. It's yeah.
It's a condition, right? Essentially, it's just a condition to throw out chunks from the tiering process when they reach the end of the tier chain or something. Yeah. So that's the terminology confusion maybe, and the other thing that I want to make sure is that we made some. So we already discussed a little bit about the partial object flag, right?
Right.
That we essentially we decided that we don't want to actually keep a flag mentioning that this object has a state of being partial or not. And instead of maintaining the state, so by not maintaining this state, we first of all have less operations to perform when we actually create more parts, or remove, add parts and chunks and remove parts and chunks for that object. So we don't need to maintain it. We have less operations, but and we also don't have the use of this flag in order to read, right? In the first versions, I think, of the namespace cache PR that Paul did with this, there was some logic around it, saying if it's partial, then we do something, and if it's not partial, we do something. We do something different regarding, are we going to read directly from hub or from cache, things like that. So I think we don't have that anymore. So we can get rid of this overhead, even for that. For your PR as well. So we and I think I heard right. Right. So we were not in sync with Paul's PR in this.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think this was like a while ago. So.
Okay. Good. So that's one thing we probably want to make sure we synchronize when and rebase the Paul's PR, right, after it's merged.
Right.
Okay. And most of this change to be. Let me collapse this. So if I remember, this was right, mostly here, right, in the builder code, right? I'm not sure if mostly, but it's like the actual work was working right here to delete all the chunks that we want to delete, right? That was one.
Yeah.
And what else? And you're saying that everything else about this will run in a background, right? The cleanup of the object metadata. We want to run that in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. So one thing I was thinking about a little bit with our with caching versus tiering is that is if we actually want to run this not in a background work at all, right? So the reason is that we moved even the caching rights. So the right from when we read from hub on a miss, we submit a work item to write to the cache, and we can even have a semaphore there in Pulse PR to limit how much we actually have pending to be written, and we can always drop. So the question is this: are we really is what we want here to go and invoke the right and wait for this eviction, to happen in line or sort of in a synchronous manner before we can actually write? Because there is a model like that for tiering. Tiering allows writes to wait. And the reason is because for tiering, there is no fallback. They can, I mean, if you don't write to your tier, it's not that you can do something else. So, but for caching, there is a fallback. The fallback is to drop the write. And I was just thinking about it. What we want to do there is to try and simplify that. We fall back to drop this right rather than fall back to evict on demand and in sync from this process of writing. So I don't think it's not critical, of course, to the functionality. But it's mostly about getting maybe less cases, and I don't know, and maybe it's also a heuristic. Yeah.
I have a question. You said just dropping the right instead of triggering an eviction.
Yeah.
So will that still trigger some kind of background eviction, just so the local cache is cleaned out a little bit? So eventually the rights can.
It is. I mean, but not. Okay. So the question is mostly about: are we going to call it directly, or are we going to let our worker, which is the TTF worker? The name is it's a tiering worker basically. TTF is a time to fill, just something about the metric that we use there, but it's just a code name. But essentially, it's a tiering worker, and the tiering worker is doing something very simple. And I'll show you the code so that we take a look at the same thing. Second. Try. Here, TTF worker, right? So this worker is looking for tiers which are full and calls build chunks to evict them, like to make room, basically. Right? So that's what it does all the time, and it has its own heuristics of how much full versus how much to evict, things like that. And this is the eviction worker, basically. Anything else runs just inside the write path or the read path, depending if we update the LRU and we read path. I don't know, in the write path, I think. So this is where it runs. So we can, if we say that this will always be the responsible code to evict, it still calls the same code, right? It does the same things, but we instead of writes waiting, we can just drop them. We want to wait for them. And maybe what we want to make sure there is that if we are dropping, at least we maybe what we can do is mark something so that this worker will not oversleep or anything like that, right? Something in that regard. So waking up or something. We can take a look. I think this worker might go to sleep for when it has no work. It can sleep probably a little bit more than other cases because it returns like the empty delay right here. But I think that in normal cases it returns a shorter delay, so it keeps on looking for tiers which are getting full. Okay.
Yeah, I'll look at it because what I have is essentially it's like a blocking operation, right? Till the eviction is performed.
It's the same code, right?
Yeah,
it calls the same
I
code.
just have to move it here, yeah, or somehow trigger it from here.
Right.
Yeah.
So purging, right? You want that to be here as well.
Right.
Um, let me show you right here because it's right in our view now. The mocking thing I was telling you. So you see that there's two functions here that doesn't do much, right? It's find tier, order interior, goes through. Maybe this one is not related, but this one for sure. So this one is build chunks is calling. You see an API for the scrubber,
right?
But the point is that we have a test for this that that constructs this. Constructs object and then overrides this function, right, and mocks it differently. So that's one of the cases I think we did that. I think there's a bunch of other work background services like that that do very much the same, and I think we can see a test like that for the worker.
Okay.
So this not, but let's see another one which I know probably is it. So MD aggregator is tested more. Let's see if I can show you the cases here. So you can see that we even get here, like inject here, things which are normally just models that we require. So in this case, we allow to mock them well, to pass on empty store and system store. Of course, minimal ones, just the ones that this requires, but the ones that here, for example. Right, so you can see that MD store here is some form of a mock, but let me see. I think so. Maybe it's not even. It might be that in this case we use the same. It is a mock in the sense that it's not part of the entire system, but it's still the module module, but it is configured a little bit different in test versus in the real system. So it's not writing to the same tables. That some things like that here. You can see we initialize it right here, but we give it some name which is random here for the test. And this sort of changed all the tables in the database. So it uses a completely different table set and things like that. So it's, there's ways to. We prefer in this case not to mock the database, but just to separate it from other things. So there's I think you'll find other examples in the background workers. Okay, guys. So we're out of time.
I had a small question. Can you go to my open pull requests? Like all the, I just created one pull request with all the S3 operations that I was working on. Handle S3 operations.
This one, the last one?
I I've been adding unit tests to it. Should I create unit tests or more of functional tests? Because the unit tests,
if you can create unit tests, it's better. It's better because when you're testing specific pieces of code, it's better to test them as units because it's easier and faster. But if you see that what you're trying to test is too spread out in the code, then it's typically you need something more integrative than
the only
a single module.
I'm using a live cloud endpoint for it, for the external bucket. So should that matter?
You mean for the unit tests or functional tests?
For the unit tests. For the unit tests. So I'm using an IBM Cloud Bucket as the hub.
Yeah, I think right. It's a good question. I think for unit tests we try not to require much, and certainly something like that. I mean, it's not that it's possible, but it means it now becomes something that every developer needs to have.
Right.
Right.
So for unit tests, we create an internal agent in the core test guy, if you remember, that simulates like a pool or an agent. We don't depend on actual processes like the hosted agents, which we need for a cloud or even a connection to the cloud.
So that means all the tests I write, they will essentially be running against NooBaa buckets as the hub bucket. So the way I set this thing up is I have my hub bucket is actually the external connection is to my IBM Cloud account. So then I'll end up with is one NooBaa bucket which will act as the hub, and then the cache bucket is also the NooBaa bucket.
A different bucket. Yeah.
Okay.
But still, the way that you describe it is very. It seems like it's. I mean, it can work as a unit test, and we have a bunch of unit tests working just like that. But just make sure you understand it has some limitations, and we are not trying to cover everything with these unit tests.
Yeah.
But it's very efficient.
Yeah, it's conditional. If the environment variables are defined, then it picks up the external bucket, or it just skips it. So
I see. So you know what? One aspect that can be made generic here is that it doesn't have to be a cost bucket, right? It can be any type, anything that I would set up that, like as a developer, I have, and I give you, the three holy information pieces you need, like the endpoint ASCII secret key, and then the test can work. I would still try to make my unit test have less. Not have dependency on external source. I don't see the. I think it's more valuable as a standalone test. That would be better.
Okay.
So if
what you can do,
even if it's accurate in the as an integration test course, then but you can have a mode like that, of course.
Okay. So what happened was, I think I was getting a different behavior in the code
with internal versus not.
Yeah, if I was using a namespace bucket or I was using a cause bucket. So I did make a change and it works, but I'll add that if no environment is defined, then it just uses a namespace bucket.
Exactly. Well, maybe so. Set default to be something that makes sense to everyone, right? And then if you want to test something extended to that, you can set your environment differently. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so let's wrap up because we're out of time. And I'll update the notes. I'll send. I'll make sure we have some review on this PR for next time. And we don't meet again before. We'll meet on Wednesday. If we have a chance to meet on Monday, try to set it up. Any final comments? Going once, twice. Done. Okay, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk soon.